Hello, everybody. My name is Roy Smith, and I am an AP English literature teacher at Round Rock High School in Round Rock, Texas. Round Rock is a community just north of Austin, Texas. My goals for today is to give you a quick overview of the AP literature reading, which I just completed last week, as well as the exam, just a little on the exam, some of the expectations, how we go about scoring essays, and how kids earn college credit. But as the title indicates here, this is a quick look. And I know that your consultants at TCU this week are going to be able to fill in some gaps or answer any questions that you may have with no problem whatsoever. And so if you'd like to contact me though, please, my email address is at the bottom here, and my Twitter handle is at English_Roy, and you can send me a message through Twitter as well. So let's go ahead and get started. What my goals are for today, I'm going to go over the exam and the reading, just give you kind of that bird's eye view, some student expectations and focus skills. We're going to look at a sample prompt from 2019, question 1, which is the poetry prompt, which has been rescored using the new scoring guide. We're going to take a look. I've included 2 different student samples and College Board's responses, and also I'm going to talk a little bit about how I look at those essays as well. And then finally, I'm going to end with the idea of how colleges look at these scores and how our students can earn qualifying scores. For those of you that don't have a lot of experience with the AP classes because you're maybe in middle school or just starting off on this path, I want to give you just a view of what the exam is that kids take in May for both the English literature exam and the AP language exam. Kids generally take the literature exam as seniors, but every now and then some juniors will pop in on it as well. So when they sit down to take their exam, and this is in a normal situation I'm talking about, not this year. In a normal situation, for their first hour, they get a multiple choice exam. There are 55 questions, and these 55 questions account for about 45% of their overall score. Out of those 55 multiple choice questions, there are 5 individual passages that they read and then answer questions for. There are 2 passages that are poems, and these poems can be from different time eras. They can be contemporary, they can be Shakespeare, they can be from the Victorian era, or any place in between. And there are going to be 2 passages that are prose, and these also can be from any era as well. And then there will be a 3rd passage that's either an additional poetry prompt or an additional prose prompt for a total of about 55 questions. To do this in 60 minutes is quite a challenge, let me tell you. If you haven't done this, the first time you take it, you wonder how in the world anybody can do these. They're very challenging. The passages are challenging, and then you're given 5 answer choices. And so the kids really have to work hard on developing the skills associated with this over the course of their English career. My bar I set for my students is to try to get them over 60% correct, because I know if they are over 60% correct, they've got a really good chance of earning a qualifying score. One of the challenges, though, is AP students are used to getting high grades. And when I say, yeah, I'm trying to get you over 60%, a lot of them just aren't comfortable with that. But at the same time, we're trying to do what's necessary for them to earn a qualifying score. After they've done that 60-minute test, they get a 10-minute break or so. Then they sit back down and they write what's called the free response questions, or the free response section of the exam. These 3 essays constitute 55% of their overall grade, and they get 2 hours in which to write these 3 essays. Question 1 is a poem, the poetry analysis. Question 2 is a prose fiction prompt or analysis of a passage, like I said, from any era. And question 3 is a literary argument, where the student brings a work that he or she has read independently or in class. There's no required book to use, just a work of fiction. And they write 3 different essays in these 2 hours. 45 minutes is recommended, but one of the challenges that students have is they generally spend more time than they should on the first 1 or the first 2, and then they run out of time on the 3rd. And that's a challenge. The kids have to learn how to work their time, how to write that response in 40 minutes. And also, I spend a lot of my time trying to explain to them that we as readers, and the College Board's expectation is not a finished, polished piece of writing. This is your first draft. This is something that could be polished later, but for right now, this is your first response to a prompt you just read. So you're reading a really challenging poem or a prose passage. You have to digest it, think about it, and then answer a prompt using evidence and analysis all in 40 minutes. So again, there are some really serious challenges here to our students and what they have to learn to do in a very short period of time. Going to the reading real fast, every year, unless there's a pandemic, we meet. When I mean we, that's a group of AP English teachers, college professors, and sometimes I've sat next to a grad student before, a PhD student. And we spend a week, 7 days in June, reading essays. And when I tell my friends this, they oftentimes look at me like I'm crazy that I'm giving up a week of my summer to read anywhere from 1,100 to 1,700 essays over the course of a week. And they could be right about being crazy, but at the same time, I look forward to it every year. It's almost like summer camp. We get together, we're with a bunch of people who all share the same interest. You develop friends. This is I just finished my 8th year of reading. I've developed friends over the years, and so we look forward to seeing each other every year. It's just a really fun week. That doesn't mean it doesn't get tough at times, because it certainly does. There are times where you kind of hit that wall, but you power through and you get to the end, and it feels really good to have helped being part of the process of scoring these essays for the kids. But the guiding principles that we follow, and this is me putting this down. This isn't off of any website or from College Board. This is just how I'm guided and how most of us are guided. I would say all of us are guided. We have a rubric or a scoring guide every year, because we only read those 3 essays I showed you on the previous slide. You read the same essay all week. So if I'm on the poetry prompt, or like this year, the prose passage or Q2, you read the same essay all week. And so you internalize that scoring guide. And what I mean by internalize it is literal. By the end of the second day, you've got it imprinted on your brain. And so we follow, when we read each student's essay, we're following that guide to the very best of our ability. That's what's guiding our process. Number 2, each student's essay deserves a fair reading. This is, to me, one of the hallmarks of the reading. It doesn't matter if it's the first essay on the first day or the last essay on the last day. That student deserves a fair reading from his reader or her reader. They deserve that. And I always try to think about those students that I'm reading as my own. I want all of my students to get a fair reading. And I am convinced and confident that every student does get a fair reading. We also have a set of benchmark essays, rangefinders, anchor sets that we are able to keep with us at our table, that during our training on the first day, we go over all of these different score points. Like this year with the 6-point rubric, we will look at examples, really good, solid examples of a 1 through 6. And then we'll talk about those essays. What makes it a 6? What makes this one a 3? What's the difference between a 3 and a 4? How can we make those judgments in a fair way that respects the student and the scoring guide? And so we spend a lot of time discussing those at our tables. We spend a lot of time practicing, scoring, and then calibrating, and then making sure that we're ready to go. We're able to ask questions when clarity is needed. And just so you can kind of get a visualization of this, there are a lot of us, but we're broken down into what are called tables. And so I might be with 7 or 8 readers at a table, but at that table is also a table leader. And the table leader is kind of our manager, kind of helps run answers questions for us, helps us out, will back read us to make sure that we're staying true to the scoring guide, and is just generally there to help. But there's also a question leader in the room who the table leader can go to. And then there's also a chief reader who the last number of years has been a great guy by the name of David Miller. Next year is going to be his last year, which I'm sorry to say, but the gentleman taking his job, Steve Price, is also an outstanding, thoughtful man. And so I'm confident that our discipline is in really good hands when it comes to our chief readers. And so there's plenty of support and help for readers, and there's plenty of support and help to make sure that we're all staying on track. And then finally, we all do reward students for what they do well. This is not a gotcha situation. We're looking to give each and every student the score that they deserve, the score that they've earned and worked hard for. And so we reward students for what they do well. Now, backing up for a minute, last year, College Board came out with their new CED, the course and exam description. And while a number of teachers were a little bit skeptical, I think everybody quickly found out that it was a big benefit to us because it took what we used to, a lot of us who were teaching this class for a while, it became unwieldy, kind of a daunting thing to cover in a year. We felt like we were having to teach everything under the sun to make sure our kids were prepared for the exam. And so it turned into a bit of a track race. It was just like you were always going from thing to thing. And I think that not only students, but teachers were a bit overwhelmed. Well, the CED narrowed our focus and our scope down. It's not a prescribed curriculum. Nothing says that you have to follow the unit guides or anything else, but it's there to let us know what College Board needs us to know, our students to know, to be successful on the exam. And so while I'm not, part of this session is not to go over the CED, I do want to point out these big ideas that are assessed on the exam. And if you look at these: character setting, structure, narration, figurative language, literary argumentation. When I first saw these, I said, well, that's what I do anyway. But then I looked at the skills, the associated skills under each one of these big ideas. And I believe there's a total of 31 skill sets or skills that we need to learn. 31 is doable. And I started looking at these, and it was true that these were a lot of things that I did anyway, were all the things I did anyway. But what got me excited was it told me a lot of things I didn't need to cover necessarily, because this is to see if a student qualifies to earn credit for a first year college literature class, not a senior in college seminar. And so it really honed in my focus. And I think for teachers who are new to AP literature, it gives you a great guideline to take a look at and follow along, because so many of our English literature teachers are the only one at their school. So this new guide has become an essential asset. And so again, I ask you to take a look at it and spend some time with it, because it's going to be a benefit not only to lit teachers, but to teachers all the way from sixth grade on through 12th grade. Here's another key concept I think that the CED pushes appropriately. Over the course of years, and again, this is from sixth on up, and I would even argue younger than that, our students need to practice these skills using works of increasing complexity, scaffolding skills and providing multiple opportunities to practice and receive feedback. These are the things that our students need to be successful in our English classes. English is not like math in some ways of learning 2 + 2 = 4. When is the end of learning in English? When are you so competent that you never need to learn more, grow more, think more clearly? I'm 64 years old, and every year I think I'm getting stronger in my reading skills, stronger in my thinking skills, because I continue to practice. I continue to challenge myself. But we need to do these things for our kids, but we need to be careful to scaffold those skills, which the CED is awesome at giving you samples and ideas to work with that, and providing multiple opportunities to practice, get our feedback, and then practice again. So I'm excited about this angle of the CED as well. This is just a quote I include because it's in my classroom, and it speaks to how I look at writing. And besides that, I really like E.B. White. It says, writing is one way to go about thinking, and the practice and habit of writing not only drain the mind, but supply it too. That is so true. There are times where my students, I can see it in their eyes, they need a break. I can see it in my own eyes when I need a break, but also this is what supplies my energy. And when I need to think, when I need to work through something, the first thing I do is go to my writing table and I write, because that's how I think. We need to give our kids opportunities to do this as well. So let's jump in. Let's talk about what we're here for today. I want to go over this 2019 question one prompt, just to give you a feel for the type of question that our kids are faced with. And this I thought was an especially challenging one because of the wording of the prompt. In my class, we spend a lot of time on how to read a prompt, how to break down a prompt, how to actually read it all. Because when you have a test that is a 40-minute test and kids are anxious to get writing, they think they need to start writing right away. And so sometimes they'll read enough of the prompt where they think they know what it's asking them, but they don't know, and then they start writing before they know exactly what the prompt was actually asking them to discuss. And so my kids are trained to read the prompt a couple of times, but then to break it down. What is the big question that's being asked of me as the writer in this prompt? And really, and then I have what is the little question? There's a big question and there's a little question. And to be successful on this exam, I have to be able to answer in both and to know what I'm being asked to do. So this one read, carefully read P.K. Page's 1943 poem, The Landlady. Then, in a well-organized essay, analyze how the poet uses literary elements and techniques to convey the speaker's complex portrayal of the landlady. Let me say that if you look this up online, you won't see this exact wording. I've reworded it using the stable prompt. All prompts going forward will use this language as far as literary elements and techniques instead of labeling imagery, tone, and structure. It will just say literary elements and techniques, which is awesome because this opens up to students to determine what they want to use. But the key to this particular passage is the last part, to convey the speaker's complex portrayal of the landlady. Now, when I ask my students really to look at that, on first glance, they may see just portrayal of the landlady. So how is the landlady portrayed? But it says to convey the speaker's complex portrayal. And they know by the time they get to me that doesn't mean the poet's. The speaker and the poet aren't necessarily the same person. The speaker's complex portrayal of the landlady. And so that caught a few students on this particular one. But it's the speaker's portrayal. As we all know, that somebody can portray me in a certain way, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what I am or how I would portray myself. I might portray myself completely differently. So this is the speaker's complex portrayal of the landlady. And then it says that you're going to use literary elements and techniques to do that. How does the poet basically use those literary techniques and elements to portray the speaker, how the speaker portrays the complex landlady? So that's where we have to spend some time, is really learning how to closely read the prompt so that we know what we're being asked to do. So I've put on here a link, and you're going to see this, besides this video and me rambling on through this presentation, there's also another one here where you can download The Landlady and read it for yourself and have it to refer back to. I've included all the prompts from that year. And as you can see on this original one here, it said elements such as imagery, selection of detail, and tone. But for the new one, it's literary elements and techniques. So this is called The Landlady. Through sepia air, the boarders come and go, impersonal as trains. Pass silently, the craving silence swallowing her speech. Click doors like shutters on her camera eye. Because of their lives become exact, because of her, their lives become exact. Their entrances and exits are designed. Phone calls are cryptic. Oh, her ticklish ears advance and fall back stunned. Nothing is unprepared. They hold the walls about them as they weep or laugh. Each face is dialed to zero publicly. She peers, stippled with curious flesh, pads on the patient landing like a pulse, unlocks their keyholes with the wire of sight, searches their rooms for clues when they are out, pricks when they come home late, wonders when they are quiet, jumps when they move, dreams that they dope or drink, trembles to know the traffic of their brains, jaywalks their street in clumsy shoes, yet knows them better than their closest friends, their cupboards and the secrets of their drawers, their books, their private mail, their photographs are theirs and hers, knows when they wash how frequently their clothes go to the cleaners, what they like to eat, their curvature of health, but even so is not content. And like a lover must know all, prays she may catch them unprepared at last and palm the dreadful riddle of their skulls, hoping the worst. Okay, kind of a bit of a creepy poem, right? I found this picture online. I kind of like it. You know, that's how I picture the landlady peering at me. And for those of you old enough watching this, if you ever watch Bewitched, I think of Gladys Kravitz across the street looking at Samantha Stevens and Darren and seeing all the shenanigans going on at their house. But this is an interesting take, isn't it, on oh, I just lost. Let me go back. This is the funny thing, by the way, and I meant to ask you guys to forgive me on this whole thing because doing these things can get really crazy when you're talking live and when you're talking, you're recording yourself. It's always so awkward. So please bear with me. I think of that Liberty Mutual commercial of the starving actor who can't get his lines right. I told my wife, we might need to get somebody to dub this for me, but I'm going to press ahead. So please give me a little bit of your grace here and we'll get through to the end of this. So the kids had to read that poem, which was not easy. And then they had to go through and formulate an answer to that big question of the prompt. And then they had to write a coherent essay that helps them to earn a qualifying score. That's a big ask. It really is a big ask. And so on the PowerPoint, I've included also a link to the 6-point rubric, and it's quite detailed. But what I would like to do is give you the quick and down and dirty overview of the 3 rows of our new 6-point rubric. So there's 3 rows for a total of 6 points. Row A is your defensible thesis. You either get a 0 or you get a 1. So this row is crucial. And I love the fact that they added the word defensible. Your thesis needs to be defended. And so if you just repeat the prompt as College Board has given it to us, you're not going to earn that point. And if you don't earn that point, then quite frankly, you're going to be in a bit of trouble going forward, right? And so we need to spend a lot of time discussing how to write a defensible thesis. This is your argument. This is what you're saying, how the speaker describes or portrays the landlady. And so that is crucial. And we spend a lot of time. As a matter of fact, the first part of my year is spent almost exclusively on the idea of a defensible thesis statement. Row B is evidence and commentary. This is scored 0 to 4 points. I highlighted, I bolded, I made it even a little bit bigger. And that emphasis is my own, because this is where you're going to win or lose in this particular game of the AP Literature exam. 0 to 4 points is earned here of how well that we use appropriate evidence and our own commentary, our own analysis and commentary to prove our defensible thesis. So the way I hope to train my kids and to give them plenty of practice with doing is making sure 100% of my kids get the defensible thesis statement in row A. I want 100% to get that. And I want my kids to be at 3 or 4 points in row B. I think that's absolutely foundational in my class. I want them to get 3 to 4 points. So when you go through and have an opportunity to look at the scoring guide, look at those differences in row 3 and 4. They're similar, but the difference between them is consistency. If we're consistent from beginning to end, we're going to score in that 4. If we've got it mostly and we're almost there, but not quite all the way there, then we're going to be at the 3 level. And we're also developing what are called lines of reasoning. So when I start with my thesis statement up here, I want to then open up lines of reasoning as I go through my evidence and commentary, that I'm showing the different lines that I'm following, the reasoning that I'm using that leads back to proving that my thesis statement is plausible, that it's viable, that it's supportable. And then row C is the most challenging row, at least for this year. I think we're going to get better at this as we go on. It's called the sophistication point. And actually, at this year's reading, more kids got the thesis point than I was even anticipating. And I learned that through the course of the year, maybe I was being a little bit too nitpicky on that particular point. But it's just what it says. It's sophistication. And this is defined, some ways it's defined as responses that earn this point may demonstrate a sophistication of thought or develop a complex literary argument by doing any of the following: identifying and exploring complexities or tensions within the passage. I spend a lot of time talking about tension in a piece and the complexities. Illuminating the student's interpretation by situating it within a broader context, accounting for alternative interpretations of the passage, and then finally, number 4, employing a style that is consistently vivid and persuasive. I work hard on those things, and I'm planning on continuing in that vein. And the things that I'm going to be working extra hard on next year is making sure they try to develop their style into vivid and persuasive in a consistent fashion, and continuing to explore the complexities and tensions within a passage. So in this presentation, I've given you 2 samples to consider, to give you a sense of what it looks like and the quality of writing that scores at the high and the middle range. I have also included the College Board's commentaries justifying these scores, okay? And so what I'd like to do is, in the interest of time, I'm going to go over a couple of or just the top one, and kind of glance at the bottom one. So this one, student sample V as in Victor. And the link I've given you takes you to more, but I picked these out as 2. This one is a good, solid essay. This is where I want my kids, my everyday kids, the kids that work hard in my class, I want them to be able to get to. And so as a reader, when this pops up on my screen this year, or when it's sitting before me in an actual book at the reading, I will take a look at it. And as I read along, I'm going to read the first paragraph. It says, in the poem, The Landlady, a speaker describes how a landlady views her tenants, yet does it so in a way that portrays the landlord to be overbearing and much too curious. Now, I would have stopped there already. I'd keep reading, but in my mind, I know that they just got the thesis point. She does so in a way that portrays the landlady to be overbearing and much too curious. That is now something that this student is going to have to argue in his or her paper. So the thesis point has already been earned. But let me caution people, is I personally, as a teacher and as a reader, I like to see the thesis statement in the opening paragraph because it gives my reading more direction. But a student can earn the thesis point whether that thesis is in the opening line like this, the last line of the opening paragraph, or the last line of the essay, or in the middle somewhere. We're trying to give students every opportunity to earn that thesis point. This student earned it early on in the first paragraph, which was great. Then the student goes on to say, she seems to want to know the boarders that set up camp in her home, yet they wish to keep to themselves. The landlady's curiosity for those who stay with her and her desire to sift through their things in order to get to know them is expressed using literary elements such as imagery and metaphors and similes. And towards the end, it's clear that she gets to know them more intimately than the boarders probably hoped or expected. Now, the funny thing is, when you're first going to the reading, you're first doing this, when you see lines like get to know them is express using, and you see an error like that, that's not going to hurt the student at all. Remember, this is a first draft. This is a first draft, okay? And so if this student had this as a take-home essay, they would hopefully clear that up in the revision process. Well, they don't have time to do that revision process in a 40-minute essay. So that's not going to hurt them. But the student earned the point and set the essay up nicely as I'm going forward. I'm knowing already that they've earned that point. So that's an awesome thing. So now moving on to the second paragraph, what I'm looking for is their evidence and commentary, their analysis to support that the speaker is portraying the landlady as overbearing and much too curious. And this student has told me that she is going to use imagery, metaphors, and similes. So it goes, in the first half of the poem, before the shift occurs between line 20 and 21, the speaker reveals the landladies yearn to know the people, the houses. Okay, that's kind of off to a bit of a clunky start, isn't it? And now we're talking about a shift here. So I'm not quite sure what that is. The speaker uses a simile. Okay, we've got a simile here, which she promised in the opening. In stanza 1 to describe closed doors to be like shutters on her camera eye. Okay, awesome. So there's some direct evidence using a simile and direct evidence. Behind the doors is what she wishes to capture. She wishes to see what goes on, but the boarder's wish for privacy prevents this wish of hers. The people who stay wish to keep their lives personal, which is why, quote, their lives become exact, and, quote, phone calls are cryptic. Again, the student is using evidence. But she just seems a bit curious at first, which is why, quote, she appears stippled with curious flesh. Again, more evidence. The next couple of lines are what she wishes she could do. She wishes she could enter their rooms and examine their things out of the idea in which she believes she does not know them like she wishes she could. That's good commentary. In lines 17 through 20, the poem ends, wonders when they are quiet, jumps when they move, dreams they dope or drink, trembles to know the traffic of their brains. More evidence. The use of ascendanton in these lines show how much the landlady dwells on the borders, how greatly it seems to affect her that she doesn't know them, when in reality, she knows them better than most people do. Okay, so this paragraph for me has good use of evidence, has some quality commentary, but also goes off base a little bit and gets a little bit distracted with, I'm not sure the ascendanton really helped much. And the student talked about a shift that didn't really follow much up on that. But the student does have some good evidence and some good commentary. So now to end the last paragraph, the student says at line 21, there's a shift. So there's that shift coming back again. And at this point in the poem, it is revealed that this landlady is oblivious to how well she actually knows her tenants. The first stanza explains how everything they use and own are essentially hers, but in a metaphorical sense. She owns the place in which they stay. So it's almost as if she is part owner of their property since she houses them. I think that's really good commentary. That's good analysis there. And she does talk about owning it in a metaphorical sense. So I like that. And I think that that is a smart part of the essay. It states that she knows when they wash, how frequently their clothes go to the cleaner, what they like to eat, but even so is not content. Again, this is good evidence going back up to the original thesis statement. Very, very good. The landlady is actually again, here's an error, know more about these people than their closest friends do, because she has familiarized herself with their routine. Unfortunately, this is not enough to satisfy her. Again, nice going back to the thesis. All she wishes is to, quote, catch them unprepared so she can get to know the part of them that is not formulated or controlled. Though she knows more about them than most, it is not enough for her. This is a solid student's essay. Uses good evidence, has some quality commentary, has some good analysis. But on the other hand, you'll notice, well, you don't notice yet because I haven't told you, but this one does not have the same level of sophistication as what we would hope to see according to the scoring guide and according to even what I read to you from the scoring guide. And so this student has to work through some issues of consistency, has to work a little bit better on staying focused, has to things like, she brought up the shift twice, but doesn't really connect or talk much about that. So there were some places where the focus gets lost a little bit, the line of reasoning gets a little bit fuzzy, but there's enough quality work in here because remember, first draft. This particular essay earned a 1.30 or a 4. A 4 out of 6 is an awesome score. I would love to be able to work with this student because this student is so close to getting not only up to the 4 in row B, but earning that sophistication point. So this is where I would love to, get my students by Christmas or January, so that I could have a couple of months to tweak them up to help them through practice and feedback and repetition and repeat, to get them up to that sophistication point. But this is a good, solid essay. Now, this is not a process essay, so if it was a process essay, I would expect a lot of this to be cleaned up and expanded and fixed in revision, but it's not. Just quickly, and I'm not going to go over this HH, the whole thing, but I do want to read you the opening so you can get a feel for it. One's predestination for introversion or extroversion, whether due to genetics, trauma, or environment, may seem to be an asset to most, or even passive at the least. In reality, this can be crippling. The landlady's message, as portrayed by P.K. Page, directly addressed the unsettling creepiness of an individual who is dependent on the many worlds that exist around her in the tenants and their personal lives. The landlady's complexity makes the audience feel something slightly less intense than condemnation, but also less sympathetic than pity, as reinforced by Page's implementation of active verbs, abrupt punctuation, and selective personification. This is when you're reading this at the reading, you've got your hands on a more advanced student. This is a very solid introduction, even though little funny errors that bother some people. I always hate when kids by this level don't know that you put a poem in quotation marks and not underline. But that's not going to hurt this student at all. And if you read through the rest of this essay, you're going to find out that these lines of reasoning are well developed. There's evidence, there's commentary, there's smart usage all the way from beginning to end. And this is your example to go through and look at what a 6 looks like. This is a 141. This is the highest score that you can get on the AP exam on any individual essay. So when you get a little bit of time and after you've looked at the rubric, go back and look at this essay and then compare it to this essay. I didn't include a 2 or a 1 or a 2 or even a 3 because that's not where I want my kids to be right now. I want them to be hitting this 4 spot, so I kind of hold this up to the level I want to get them at. But I can tell you what, if I was at a school that my students were writing at a different level, I would start where the level that's just up from where they are there and try to get them to that ladder and then get them to the next rung of the ladder, then the next rung of the ladder. I don't start off by showing my students 6 because I don't want to discourage them. But I know that at my school, my kids can write this. And once they're here, then I take them up to the next step. And even if I have a person writing at a 6, I try to get them up to the next step after that as well. So I've given you these two, but I've also given you a link right here that will take you to more student samples if you care to look through those. So finally, quickly to end this, the scores our students receive after taking the exam, I hate when they're referred to as pass-fail. What does it take to pass the AP exam? I know what people mean. I know what they're getting at. But I think that we need to avoid the idea of passing the exam or failing the exam. The scores students earn suggest how prepared they are for college-level English literature classes. Many colleges, and in Texas, all state colleges must grant scores or credit for scores of 3. But some other private schools, Baylor, Rice, other schools in Texas, might require higher scores. But our students get their scores back on anywhere from 1 to 5. So if a student gets a 1, what College Board is saying, there's really they can't recommend whether the student is qualified or not. If the student scores a 2, they're possibly qualified. They're close, we're not sure. Possibly. And by the way, just as a side note, some of my students that I'm the most proud of scored 2s. They made the biggest jumps and gains in their literacy over the course of a year than kids that walked in already at the 5 level. So 2s are nothing to be ashamed of at all. A 3 is a qualifying score. That means that you qualify to earn advanced placement. 4 means very well qualified. And 5, we go to the word extremely well qualified. And so in my classes, I have my share of 4s and 5s, but I have my share of 3s, and I have some 2s, and I every now and then have some 1s. It doesn't matter to me. I know they've gained in literacy over the course of the year. I know that they're being pushed to do the very best they can and to reach their highest and best level. So scores are what they are. I try not to get too anxious about scores because in the big picture, it's a small picture. So that's how kids are scored, though. Um, that's it. That's what I have to share with you today. I certainly hope this was helpful. We are at our jobs, especially during these challenging and difficult times, because we love to work with kids. We have a passion for our students, for our sixth graders, our seventh graders, our eighth graders, our freshmen, sophomore, our juniors, and seniors. They're our kids, and we want the very best for them. And I know that when my students sit down to take the AP literature exam, every teacher that student has ever had is sitting there with him or her. We are all there with that student because this takes a team. I can't do this in 1 year. I can't teach kids everything they need to know in 1 year. There's no way. It's all of us. So the scores that I receive that have my name on it has all the teachers who these kids have had. All their names should be on them. And I know that we're all doing our very best. And I hope that giving you this brief preview into the AP Lit exam and into the AP reading, you'll share my excitement for that journey that they're on. And I know that you're already doing that anyway, but I hope this helps give you a view from my perspective as an AP literature teacher and as an AP reader and as a consultant. I'm doing 3 sessions here at TCU this year, so hopefully I'll have a chance to get to meet some of you. And I was there last year and just absolutely loved getting to meet and work with the teachers at TCU. So have a great day. Let's hope we get back in the classroom real soon, and have a great rest of your day and the rest of this APSI. Thanks a lot.